When a billionaire CEO mocked by her rival dares a night janitor to save her empire, she never expects him to speak with the cold precision of a ghost returning from exile. Evan Cross wipes floors to pay for his dying daughter's medicine. But the mathematical genius that once ruled Wall Street still burns behind his exhausted eyes. Now he has 48 hours to expose a conspiracy, dismantle a trap designed by the very people who destroyed him, and stop a weaponized algorithm from crashing the markets. One man, one mop, one impossible deadline. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down like judgment over Seattle, hammering the glass walls of Onyx Tower hard enough to make even the steel frame seem fragile. 47 stories up, Raina Mercer stood alone in her corner office, staring at the city lights bleeding through the storm, and tried to remember the last time she'd slept more than 3 hours in a night. She couldn't. The reflection in the glass showed a woman who'd spent 15 years clawing her way to the top of Mercer Global Industries, a tech conglomerate worth $8 billion on paper, and maybe nothing at all by Friday. Her dark hair was pulled back tight enough to hurt. Her eyes were the color of smoke, and just as hard to hold on to. She wore a charcoal suit that cost more than most people made in a month, but the fabric couldn't hide the tension strung through her shoulders like piano wire about to snap. Behind her, the office was a monument to controlled ambition, minimalist furniture, awards she'd stopped caring about years ago. A single photograph on the desk, her late father, the man who'd built this company from nothing and left it to her with a warning she'd never forgotten. Trust no one, verify everything, and never, ever show weakness. She'd followed those rules like gospel, and somehow she was still losing. Her phone buzzed. She didn't need to look to know it was another update from her CFO, another report confirming what she already knew. Gideon Vale was tightening the noose. The hostile takeover wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a countdown, and she was running out of moves. Raina turned from the window and walked to her desk, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a metronome counting down to disaster. She picked up the contract, thick, bound, stamped with the logo of Cerberus Capital Partners. The acquisition deal that was supposed to save her. The merger that was supposed to give her the leverage to fight back. Except something about it felt wrong. She'd read it 4 times. Her lawyers had read it 6. Her board had voted unanimously to approve it. But every instinct she'd honed over 15 years of corporate warfare was screaming at her to stop, to look harder, to find the trap she knew had to be buried somewhere in the fine print. The problem was, she was out of time. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Gideon's deadline was Friday afternoon. If she didn't sign the Cerberus deal by then, he'd move forward with the takeover and strip her company down to the bones. If she did sign it, she'd be locked into a partnership with investors she didn't know, terms she didn't fully understand, and clauses that gave her just enough control to feel safe, but not enough to survive a fight. It was a trap. She just couldn't see the teeth yet. Raina set the contract down and pressed her palms flat against the desk, forcing herself to breathe. She'd built this company into something her father would have been proud of. She'd outmaneuvered rivals, crushed competitors, turned every crisis into an opportunity. She didn't lose. But Gideon Vale wasn't like the others. He was a predator who'd made his fortune buying struggling companies, bleeding them dry, and walking away with the bones. He was charming in public, vicious in private, and utterly without mercy. He'd been circling Mercer Global for 2 years, waiting for a moment of weakness, and now, thanks to a supply chain disaster, a botched product launch, and a stock price that had dropped 18% in 6 months, he'd found it. And he was coming for everything. The door to her office opened without a knock. Raina didn't flinch. Only one person in the building had the nerve to walk in unannounced, and she'd been expecting him. "Late night, Miss Mercer?" The voice was smooth, cultured, and laced with just enough mockery to set her teeth on edge. Gideon Vale stepped into the office like he owned it, his tailored suit immaculate, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. He was tall, silver-haired, and handsome in the way that made people forget how dangerous he was until it was too late. Raina straightened, her expression locked down tight. "You're not supposed to be here." "I'm not supposed to be a lot of places." Gideon glanced around the office, his gaze lingering on the awards, the photograph, the view. "Beautiful space. I'll probably keep it when this is all over. Maybe turn it into a lounge for the new executive team. You're wasting your time, Raina crossed her arms, refusing to let him see the exhaustion grinding her down. The Cerberus deal closes Friday. Your takeover dies with it. Gideon's smile widened. Does it? He moved closer, and Raina forced herself to hold her ground. He stopped just on the other side of her desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, suffocating. You know what I love about you, Raina? He tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he was already tired of solving. You're so convinced you're the smartest person in the room, and maybe you are, but intelligence without experience is just noise. Get to the point. The point is, you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life. Gideon leaned forward, resting his knuckles on her desk. That contract you're planning to sign? It's not a lifeboat, Raina. It's an anchor. And when you realize it, I'll be waiting to buy what's left for pennies on the dollar. Raina's jaw tightened. If you're so confident, why are you here? Because I'm a gentleman. Gideon straightened, adjusting his cuffs. I wanted to give you a chance to walk away with some dignity. Sell to me now, avoid the embarrassment, and maybe, I'll let you keep a board seat. Ceremonial, of course. Get out, Gideon laughed, low and smooth. Friday, Raina, tick-tock. He turned and walked toward the door, then paused, glancing back over his shoulder. Oh, and one more thing. If you're looking for financial advice, you might want to ask that janitor downstairs. He's probably got more sense than your entire executive team combined. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Raina stood there, trembling with rage she couldn't afford to show. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. She wanted to hunt Gideon Vale down and make him choke on every smug word he'd ever spoken. Instead, she grabbed her coat and headed for the elevator. The lobby of Onyx Tower at midnight was a cathedral of marble and glass, silent except for the hum of the ventilation system and the rhythmic whisper of a floor buffer moving across the tiles. Most of the lights were dimmed, leaving the space bathed in soft blue shadows, and the glow of the city bleeding in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Evan Cross worked alone. He always did. He pushed the buffer slowly across the marble, his movements steady, mechanical, almost meditative. His gray uniform was clean but worn, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hands were calloused, his shoulders broad, and his face, hard to read. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair that needed a cut. A jawline sharp enough to suggest he hadn't always spent his nights cleaning floors. But it was his eyes that told the real story. They were the eyes of a man who'd seen too much, lost too much, and buried everything that mattered so deep that even he couldn't find it anymore. They were the eyes of someone who'd learned to be invisible, because visibility meant danger, and danger meant losing the one thing he had left. Evan didn't look up when the elevator doors opened. He didn't react when two sets of footsteps echoed across the lobby, one sharp and confident, the other slower, heavier, laced with fury. He just kept buffing the floor. Unbelievable. Raina's voice cut through the silence like a blade. That arrogant, condescending... She stopped mid-sentence, breathing hard, her fists clenched at her sides. Gideon's words were still ringing in her ears, mocking her, taunting her, and the worst part was, he was right. She didn't know what was wrong with the Cerberus deal. She didn't know how to stop him. She was running out of time, out of options, and out of people she could trust. And then Gideon's parting shot echoed back to her, sharp and cruel. Ask the janitor for financial advice. Raina turned, her gaze landing on the man with the floor buffer. He was maybe 20 feet away, his back to her, working in silence like the building was empty. The anger inside her twisted into something reckless. You. Evan stopped. Slowly, he straightened, his hand still resting on the buffer handle. He didn't turn around. You want financial advice? Raina's voice was cold, brittle. Fine. Let's hear it. Tell me how to save an $8 billion company from a hostile takeover. Go ahead, I'm listening. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then Evan turned. He moved slowly, like a man waking from a long, dreamless sleep. His eyes met hers across the lobby, and Raina felt something shift. Something she couldn't name. Something that made her breath catch in her throat. He didn't look like a janitor anymore. He looked like a ghost. Don't sign the Cerberus deal, Evan said quietly. His voice was calm, precise, and utterly certain, like he'd just delivered a diagnosis, not an opinion. Raina blinked. Excuse me? The acquisition. Evan's gaze didn't waver. It's a trap. If you sign it, you'll hand over 51% control of your company within 6 months. The fine print in Section 12, Clause 4A, locks you into a mandatory convertible stock provision tied to quarterly performance benchmarks you can't possibly meet. The moment you miss one, Cerberus triggers a dilution clause, and your ownership drops below the controlling threshold. The lobby went dead silent. Raina stared at him, her mind racing. She'd read that contract 4 times. Her lawyers had vetted it. Her CFO had signed off on it. And this man, this janitor, had just recited a clause she'd missed in language so specific it made her skin crawl. "Who the hell are you?" she whispered. Evan's expression didn't change. "Someone who knows how this ends." Raina's heart was pounding now, her exhaustion forgotten. She took a step closer, her eyes locked on his. "You're telling me the deal is rigged?" "I'm telling you it's designed to look safe until it's too late." Evan's voice was quiet, but there was weight behind it, years of experience, of knowledge, of something buried so deep it had nearly been forgotten. Cerberus isn't trying to partner with you. They're positioning themselves to take control without triggering a hostile takeover disclosure. It's elegant, it's legal, and if you sign it, you lose everything. Raina felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Everything Gideon had said, everything her instincts had been screaming at her, it all clicked into place. "How do you know this?" she demanded. Evan held her gaze for a long moment, then looked away. "Because I've seen it before." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Raina's mind was spinning. She didn't know this man. She had no reason to trust him. But the way he spoke, calm, certain, like he was reading a script he'd written himself, made her believe him in a way she hadn't believed anyone in years. She glanced toward the elevator, where Gideon had disappeared minutes ago, then back at Evan. "If you're right," she said slowly, "then I need proof. I need to see the trap. I need to know who's behind it." Evan didn't move. "You don't want me involved in this." "I don't care what I want. I care what I need." Raina's voice hardened. "If that deal is a trap, I have 48 hours to prove it and kill it before my board forces me to sign. Can you do that?" Evan was silent. "Can you?" Raina pressed. He looked at her again, and for just a second she saw something flicker behind his eyes. Something dark. Something dangerous. Something that had been locked away for a very long time. "Yes," he said quietly. Raina nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Then come with me." The elevator ride to the 47th floor was the longest 2 minutes of Raina's life. She stood on one side, her arms crossed, her mind racing through 1,000 calculations. Evan stood on the other, silent, his expression unreadable. When the doors opened, she led him through the executive suite, past the empty desks, the dark conference rooms, the hushed weight of a building holding its breath. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Everything she needed to say was waiting in her office. She unlocked the door and gestured for him to enter. Evan stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the space in a single efficient glance. He didn't comment on the view, the awards, the pristine furniture. He just moved to the center of the room and waited. Raina closed the door and locked it. "Sit," she said, nodding toward the chair across from her desk. Evan didn't sit. "I'd rather stand." "Fine." Raina moved behind her desk, her hands resting on the surface. "Let's start with the obvious question. Who are you?" "Evan Cross?" "That's a name, not an answer." Evan's jaw tightened. "It's all you need." "Wrong." Raina leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You just walked into my lobby and dismantled a contract that my entire legal team approved. You quoted clauses from memory. You spoke like someone who's done this before. So I'll ask you again, who the hell are you?" Evan held her gaze for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "I used to work in finance." "Doing what?" "Algorithmic trading, quantitative analysis, risk modeling." His voice was flat, stripped of emotion. "I built predictive systems for hedge funds, big ones. I was good at it. Raina's eyes narrowed. Past tense. Past tense, Evan confirmed. Why? Because I made a mistake. His voice didn't waver, but there was something underneath it, something sharp, something broken. I trusted the wrong people. I got framed for insider trading. By the time I proved I was innocent, my career was over, my reputation was destroyed, and the people who set me up were long gone. Raina studied him, searching for cracks in the story. So you became a janitor? I became a father. Evan's voice softened, just barely. My daughter was diagnosed with a chronic illness. The treatment costs more than I could make in any legitimate finance job, not with my history. So I took work that didn't ask questions and paid cash. I work nights. I stay invisible. And I take care of her. The room went quiet. Raina had expected lies, evasion, maybe even arrogance. She hadn't expected the raw honesty in his voice, the weight of a man carrying more than anyone should have to. How old is she? Raina asked quietly. 7. Evan's expression softened, just for a second. Her name is Maya. Raina nodded slowly. And if I ask you to help me, you're putting her at risk. Yes. Why would you do that? Evan met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something other than exhaustion in his gaze. She saw resolve. Because the people who framed me are the same people trying to destroy you, he said quietly. And if I don't stop them now, they'll keep doing this to someone else. Raina felt a chill run down her spine. You know who's behind the Cerberus deal? I have an idea. Tell me. Evan shook his head. Not until I'm sure. But if I'm right, this isn't just about your company. It's bigger than that. Raina stared at him, her mind racing. Every instinct told her this was insane, trusting a stranger, a man with a destroyed reputation and a mop handle, to save her empire. But every instinct also told her he was telling the truth. 48 hours, she said finally. That's all the time we have. You find the proof, you expose the trap, and you give me a way to kill it. If you do, I'll pay you whatever you want. If I don't, you'll have me arrested, Evan finished. Raina didn't deny it. Evan nodded slowly. Fair enough. Good. Raina reached into her desk and pulled out a key card. You'll work out of the fishbowl, the glass office on the 32nd floor. It has access to the company's financial systems, legal archives, and communication logs. Everything you need is in there. She slid the key card across the desk. Evan picked it up, his fingers closing around it slowly. You're giving me full access? I don't have a choice. Raina's voice was hard. You said you could do this. Prove it. Evan looked at the key card for a long moment, then slipped it into his pocket. I'll need one more thing. What? Time with Maya. His voice was quiet but firm. I need to make sure she's okay before I start. I can't do this if I don't know she's safe. Raina hesitated, then nodded. Go, but be back here by 6 a.m. The clock is already running. Evan turned toward the door, then paused, glancing back. Miss Mercer? What? Don't sign that contract. His voice was calm, certain. No matter what happens. Don't sign it. And then he was gone. Evan Cross drove through the rain-soaked streets of Seattle in a 15-year-old Honda Civic that rattled every time he hit a pothole. The windshield wipers were losing their battle against the storm, and the heater had given up years ago, but he didn't notice. His mind was already 3 steps ahead, running through variables, calculating risks, mapping out the battlefield he was about to step onto. He hadn't lied to Raina Mercer. The Cerberus deal was a trap. The people behind it were the same ones who'd destroyed his life. And if he didn't stop them, they'd keep burning empires until there was nothing left but ash. But he'd left out one critical detail. The algorithm they were using to engineer the takeover wasn't just sophisticated, it was his. He'd built it years ago, a predictive model designed to analyze market volatility, identify weaknesses in corporate structures, and exploit them with surgical precision. It was elegant, it was powerful, and it was supposed to be locked away, destroyed, forgotten. Except it wasn't. Someone had stolen it, someone had weaponized it, and now it was being used to do exactly what Evan had always feared it would, destroy everything it touched. He pulled into the parking lot of a small apartment complex on the edge of the city and killed the engine. The building was old, worn down, the kind of place where people didn't ask questions and landlords didn't fix things unless they had to. Evan climbed the stairs to the second floor, his footsteps echoing in the stairwell, and unlocked the door to Unit 2C. Inside, the apartment was small but clean. A couch that had seen better days, a kitchen table covered in medical bills, a single photograph on the wall, Evan and Maya at the zoo, both of them smiling like the world was still kind. And in the bedroom, curled up under a blanket, was the only thing that mattered. Maya. She was small for 7, her dark hair tangled across the pillow, her breathing soft and steady. Evan moved to the bedside and knelt down, pressing his hand gently against her forehead. She was warm, too warm, but not feverish. Not yet. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy?" "Yeah, it's me." She smiled, sleepy and small. "You're home early." "Just for a little bit." Evan brushed her hair back gently. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," she yawned. "Mrs. Alvarez made me soup." "That's good." Evan glanced at the nightstand where a row of pill bottles sat lined up like soldiers. He checked the labels, counted the doses, made sure everything was in order. "Daddy?" Maya's voice was soft, uncertain. "Yeah? Are you okay?" Evan looked at her, this tiny, fragile, impossibly strong little girl, and felt something crack inside his chest. "I'm okay," he lied. Maya studied him with the kind of seriousness only children could manage. "You're lying." Evan exhaled slowly. "Maybe a little." "Is it bad?" "It's complicated." Maya frowned. "Complicated like bills or complicated like the hospital?" Evan's throat tightened. "Complicated like I have to fix something big. But I'll be back soon. I promise." Maya reached out and took his hand, her fingers small and warm. "You always come back." "Always," Evan whispered. He stayed with her until she fell asleep again, then stood slowly and walked to the kitchen. He pulled out his phone and stared at the number he'd avoided calling for 3 years. Then he dialed. The line rang twice before a voice answered, sharp, cautious, familiar. "This is Carter." "Miles." Evan's voice was quiet. "It's Evan Cross." There was a long silence on the other end. "You're supposed to be dead," Miles said finally. "I'm supposed to be a lot of things." Evan leaned against the counter, exhaustion pressing down on him like a weight. "I need your help." "With what?" "Stopping the people who destroyed us both." Another silence. Then, "I'm listening." Evan closed his eyes. "Good. Because we don't have much time." Miles Carter lived in a loft downtown that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd given up on impressing people and started living for themselves instead. Exposed brick. Industrial lighting. A desk covered in monitors that glowed blue in the darkness. He was 32, lean, with the kind of nervous energy that came from spending too many hours staring at market data and not enough sleeping. When he opened the door and saw Evan standing in the hallway, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Jesus Christ," Miles breathed. "Can I come in?" Miles stepped back, his eyes never leaving Evan's face. Yeah, come in." The door closed behind them, and for a moment neither man spoke. They just stood there in the dim light of the loft, the weight of 3 years pressing down between them like a physical thing. Miles broke first. "I thought you were dead. Or in prison. Or, I don't know, man. You just disappeared." "I had to." "Why?" Evan moved to the window, looking out at the city lights bleeding through the rain. "Because staying meant putting Maya in danger, and I couldn't do that." Miles ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You could have told me. You could have reached out, something." "I couldn't risk it." Evan turned to face him. "The people who framed me were looking for anyone connected to me. If I'd contacted you, they would have come after you too." "They came after me anyway," Miles said quietly. 2 months after you vanished, I got audited. Federal agents showed up at my apartment, my office, my gym. They tore my life apart looking for evidence that I'd helped you. It took 6 months to clear my name." Evan's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" Miles's voice was sharp now, bitter. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you saved yourself and left the rest of us to burn. I saved my daughter. Evan's voice was quiet but hard. That's all I had left. The anger drained out of Miles's face, replaced by something sadder, something tired. He sank down onto the couch and stared at his hands. How is she? Sick. Expensive. The reason I work nights cleaning floors instead of doing what I'm good at. Miles looked up, studying Evan's face. And now you're here, after 3 years, which means something's wrong. Something's very wrong. Evan moved to the desk, his eyes scanning the monitors. Market data, trading algorithms, real-time feeds from exchanges around the world. Miles had rebuilt his career piece by piece, staying small, staying quiet, staying alive. Tell me you still have access to high-frequency trading platforms. Miles's eyes narrowed. Why? Because the algorithm we built together, the one that was supposed to be destroyed, is being used to engineer a hostile takeover. And if we don't stop it, it's going to crash the markets and destroy a lot of innocent people. Miles stood slowly. Argent. Evan's blood went cold. You know about it? I've heard whispers. Rumors in the trading community about a system that can predict volatility patterns with impossible accuracy. Some people think it's AI. Some think it's insider trading at scale, but I recognize the signature. Miles crossed his arms. It's your work, Evan. The pattern recognition, the layered prediction models, the way it exploits micro inefficiencies. It's all you. It's not me anymore. Evan's voice was hard. Someone stole it, weaponized it, and now they're using it to take down Mercer Global Industries. Raina Mercer's company? Miles frowned. I've been watching that stock. The decline looks organic. Supply chain issues, product failures, market correction. It's manufactured, Evan interrupted. Every single crisis that hit her company over the past 6 months was engineered. The supply chain disruption? Orchestrated. The product launch failure? Sabotage. The stock decline? Algorithmic manipulation designed to look natural. Miles stared at him. That's impossible. The coordination required, the resources, the access. Unless you have someone inside the company feeding you data and someone outside with enough capital to move markets. Evan's eyes were dark. Sound familiar? Miles went very still. Gideon Vale. And Harold Wexler. The name hit Miles like a punch. Harold Wexler. The man who'd mentored them both. The man who'd promised them careers, wealth, influence. The man who'd framed Evan and walked away clean while everything burned. He's still out there, Miles said quietly. He never left. Evan's voice was cold. He just got smarter. And now he's about to pull off the biggest theft I've ever seen. Miles turned away, his hands clenched into fists. What do you need from me? Access, timing, trust. Evan moved to stand beside him. I'm going to expose the trap, dismantle the conspiracy, and stop Argent from executing. But to do that, I need someone who can operate inside the trading platforms without triggering alerts. Someone who understands the system well enough to kill it from the inside. You need me to commit financial suicide, Miles said flatly. I need you to do the right thing. Miles laughed, bitter and sharp. The right thing got me audited, blacklisted, and broke. The right thing doesn't pay bills, Evan. Neither does watching the world burn because you were too scared to fight back. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and true. Miles stared at Evan for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. If I do this, he said quietly, and we get caught, we both go to prison. You understand that, right? Yes. And if we don't get caught, the people behind this will come after us anyway. Yes. Miles shook his head. You're asking me to risk everything on a ghost and a janitor's hunch. I'm asking you to trust the man you used to know, Evan said quietly, before everything went to hell, before the lies and the betrayal and the fear. You trusted me once, Miles. Trust me one more time. Miles closed his eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like gravity. Then he opened them and met Evan's gaze. When do we start? By 6 a.m., Evan was back at Onyx Tower, keycard in hand, exhaustion clawing at the edges of his mind. He took the elevator to the 32nd floor and stepped into the fishbowl, a glass-walled office that sat in the center of the floor like an exhibit, visible from every angle, impossible to hide in, perfect. If Raina wanted transparency, she'd get it. And if there was a traitor inside the company watching his every move, they'd see exactly what he wanted them to see. Evan settled into the chair, powered up the workstation, and let his fingers rest on the keyboard. It had been 3 years since he'd done this kind of work. 3 years since he'd felt the rush of diving into systems, unraveling patterns, hunting down the invisible threads that connected chaos to conspiracy. He'd almost forgotten how much he missed it. Almost. He started with the basics: financial records, acquisition contracts, board communications. He pulled everything related to the Cerberus deal and laid it out in layers, cross-referencing dates, amounts, clauses, and signatures. On the surface, it looked clean, professional, legitimate. But Evan had learned a long time ago that the surface was where amateurs stopped looking. He went deeper. He traced the origin of Cerberus Capital Partners, a shell corporation registered in Delaware, funded through a series of offshore accounts, controlled by a holding company that didn't exist on paper 6 months ago. The investors listed in the contract were real, their credentials verified, their reputation solid. But the money behind them wasn't. Evan pulled up the transaction histories and followed the flow of capital backward through the layers. Wire transfers, offshore holdings, subsidiary agreements, and then, buried 3 levels deep, he found it. A ghost account. It was subtle, almost invisible. A line item labeled HVAC maintenance, recurring monthly, amounts varying between $12,000 and $20,000. To anyone auditing the books, it looked legitimate. Routine building expenses. Except Onyx Tower's HVAC system was managed by an external contractor whose invoices were logged separately. Evan's pulse quickened. He pulled the ghost account's transaction history and started mapping the payments. Every month for the past 18 months, money had flowed out of Mercer Global's operating budget into an account registered to a company called Pinnacle Systems Group. Evan searched the name. Nothing. No website, no business filings, no physical address. A shell inside a shell. He cross-referenced the account numbers with known financial patterns, the kinds of structures used to launder money, hide payments, or funnel cash to people who didn't want to be found. And then he saw it. The signature. It was buried in the metadata of a single encrypted file attached to one of the payments. A digital fingerprint so small that most forensic accountants would have missed it. But Evan wasn't most accountants. He'd built systems designed to catch exactly this kind of trace. He decrypted the file, and his world tilted. The file contained a single video, time-stamped 6 weeks ago, filmed in what looked like a private club. Low lighting, leather chairs, the kind of place where deals were made and laws were suggestions. 2 men sat across from each other, drinks in hand, voices low but clear. Evan recognized them both. The first was Gideon Vale, leaning back in his chair, smiling like a predator who'd already tasted blood. The second was Harold Wexler, Evan's former mentor, the man who'd destroyed his career, the man who sat on Mercer Global's board of directors, the traitor. Evan's hands clenched into fists as he listened to the conversation. "She's running out of time," Harold said, swirling his whiskey. "The board's pushing for the Cerberus deal. She'll sign by Friday. And when she does?" Gideon's smile widened. Clause 4A triggers within 90 days. Her ownership drops below controlling interest, and we move the board to force a restructuring. She'll be out before she realizes what happened. Elegant. Necessary. Harold's voice was cold. Raina's too much like her father, stubborn, idealistic. She'll never sell willingly, so we take it piece by piece until there's nothing left to fight for. Gideon raised his glass. To the long game. Harold clinked his glass against Gideon's. To inevitability. The video ended. Evan sat frozen, his mind racing. He'd known Harold was involved. He'd suspected the betrayal ran deep, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the casual cruelty in Harold's voice as he dismantled the company of a woman who trusted him, made Evan's blood run cold. He saved the file, encrypted it 3 layers deep, and buried it in a secure partition where no one could access it without his personal key. Then he kept digging. By noon, Evan had mapped the entire conspiracy. Cerberus Capital wasn't just a front. It was a coordinated attack designed to look like a legitimate business deal. The investors were real, but their capital was being funneled through Harold's ghost accounts, routed back into offshore holdings controlled by Gideon. The contract itself was a masterpiece of legal manipulation, written to give Raina just enough control to feel safe while quietly dismantling her authority clause by clause. And underneath it all, buried in the transaction data, Evan found the signature of his own algorithm. Argent. It had been used to time every crisis, every stock fluctuation, every piece of negative press that hit Mercer Global over the past 6 months. The system predicted market reactions with surgical precision, then exploited them to drive the stock price down, create panic among investors, and force Raina into a corner where the Cerberus deal looked like her only option. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. And it was about to get worse. Evan pulled up the Argent execution logs and felt his stomach drop. The algorithm wasn't done. It was waiting for Raina to sign the contract, because the moment she did, Argent would trigger a final cascade, a coordinated series of trades designed to create a flash crash in Mercer Global's stock price at market close on Friday. The crash would look organic, driven by panic selling and algorithmic trading patterns. But in reality, it would be engineered chaos, timed to coincide with the contract signature and lock in the ownership transfer before Raina could react. By the time she realized what had happened, it would be too late. Gideon and Harold would own her company, and she'd be left with nothing. Evan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had the proof. He had the video. He had the transaction records and the algorithm logs. He had everything Raina needed to expose the conspiracy and kill the deal. But he also had a problem. Argent wasn't just an algorithm anymore. It was a weapon. And if he tried to stop it without the right access, the right timing, the right execution, it would detonate anyway, and take the entire market down with it. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A message from Miles. "You were right, Argent's live. I'm seeing pre-execution patterns across multiple exchanges. Whatever it's waiting for, it's close." Evan typed back, "How close?" Miles's reply came instantly. "Hours. Maybe less. If the trigger event happens, we won't have time to stop it." Evan closed his eyes, forcing himself to think. The trigger event was Raina's signature, which meant he had until Friday morning, less than 36 hours, to dismantle the conspiracy, expose the traitors, and kill the algorithm before it executed. And he had to do it without tipping off Harold or Gideon. No pressure. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Raina. Evan answered. "Yeah. Conference room. Now." Her voice was tight, controlled. "We have a problem." Evan found Raina in the executive conference room on the 47th floor, standing at the head of a long table, her arms crossed, her expression locked down. She wasn't alone. 3 other people sat around the table. Her CFO, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and an expensive suit, her head of legal, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, and Harold Wexler himself, silver-haired and composed, watching Evan with the calm interest of a man who'd already won. Evan's pulse spiked, but he kept his expression neutral. "Miss Mercer," he said quietly. "Mr. Cross." Raina gestured to an empty chair. "Sit." Evan didn't move. "I'd rather stand." "I don't care what you'd rather do. Sit." Evan held her gaze for a moment, then sat. Raina turned to the others. "This is Evan Cross. He's been helping me review the Cerberus acquisition." The CFO frowned. "I wasn't aware we'd hired an outside consultant." "You weren't," Raina said flatly. "I did, personally." Harold leaned forward slightly, his expression pleasant but unreadable. "And what exactly are Mr. Cross's qualifications?" Evan met Harold's eyes across the table and felt the years collapse between them. The last time they'd sat across from each other, Harold had been explaining why Evan's career was over, why the evidence was overwhelming, why fighting back would only make things worse. Evan had believed him. He wouldn't make that mistake again. "I worked in quantitative finance," Evan said quietly. "Algorithmic trading, risk analysis." "Impressive." Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And where did you work most recently?" "Nowhere you'd recognize." The legal head, a woman named Diana Chen, narrowed her eyes. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I'm giving." Raina cut in before the tension could spiral. Mr. Cross has identified several concerns with the Cerberus deal. I want him to present them to the group. The CFO, Martin Reeves, sighed. Raina, we've vetted this contract 6 ways from Sunday. The board approved it unanimously. We're running out of time to second-guess. I'm not second-guessing, Raina said sharply. I'm doing my job. Now let him speak. All eyes turned to Evan. He took a breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Harold was watching him like a hawk, looking for any sign of recognition, any crack in the facade. If Evan revealed too much too soon, Harold would know he'd been exposed, and the whole conspiracy would collapse inward, taking Raina's company with it. So Evan kept it simple. Section 12, Clause 4A, he said. Mandatory convertible stock provision tied to quarterly performance benchmarks. If Mercer Global misses a single benchmark, Cerberus gains the right to trigger a dilution event that reduces Miss Mercer's ownership below the controlling threshold. Diana frowned. We reviewed that clause. The benchmarks are reasonable. They're impossible, Evan said flatly. The targets are set 15% above your current performance metrics. Given your supply chain issues, product delays, and stock decline, there's no realistic scenario where you hit those numbers in the next 90 days. Martin shifted uncomfortably. That's speculative. It's mathematical. Evan pulled out a printed spreadsheet and slid it across the table. I ran the projections. Even under ideal conditions, you'd need a 30% revenue increase and a 20% cost reduction in Q1 alone. That's not business strategy. That's fantasy. Raina picked up the spreadsheet, her eyes scanning the numbers. And if we miss the targets? You lose control of your company within 6 months. The room went silent. Harold leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Mr. Cross raises interesting points, but I think we're overlooking the bigger picture. Cerberus is offering us capital, resources, and strategic partnerships that we desperately need. Yes, there's risk, but there's also opportunity. Opportunity to hand over the company, Evan said quietly. Harold's smile thinned. That's a cynical interpretation. It's an accurate one. Diana glanced between them. Do we have an alternative? Because if we don't sign this deal, Gideon Vale's takeover bid moves forward Friday afternoon. We're out of options. Not yet, Evan said. He looked at Raina. Give me 24 hours. I'll find you another way. Martin laughed, sharp and bitter. Another way? Like what? A miracle. Like proof that this deal is a trap. The room went very still. Harold's expression didn't change, but Evan saw it. The slightest tension in his shoulders, the briefest flicker in his eyes. Recognition. Suspicion. Danger. That's a serious accusation, Harold said quietly. It's a serious situation, Evan replied. Raina set the spreadsheet down. 24 hours, Mr. Cross. But if you can't deliver, we're signing that contract Friday morning. Understood? Understood. Good. Raina stood. This meeting is over. The others filed out, Diana and Martin exchanging worried glances, Harold moving slowly, his gaze lingering on Evan for just a moment too long. When the door closed, Raina turned to Evan. You're playing with fire, she said quietly. I know. Harold Wexler is one of the most respected figures in this industry. If you're wrong about him, I'm not. Raina studied his face. How do you know? Evan held her gaze. Because he's the one who destroyed me 3 years ago, and now he's trying to destroy you. The weight of the truth settled between them like a stone. Raina's expression didn't change, but Evan saw the shift in her eyes. The moment belief took root. Show me, she said quietly. Evan led her back to the fishbowl office and pulled up the video on the monitor. He didn't say anything. He just hit play and let Harold's voice fill the room. Raina watched in silence, her expression unreadable, but her hands gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white. When the video ended, she didn't move. How long have you had this? She asked quietly. Since this morning. And you didn't tell me immediately? I needed to verify it, make sure it wasn't fabricated or planted. Evan met her eyes. It's real, Miss Mercer. Harold's been feeding information to Gideon for months. The ghost account in your HVAC budget? That's how he's been paid. The Cerberus deal? It's the final piece of the trap. Raina turned away, her jaw tight. He was my father's best friend. He's been on this board for 20 years. He taught me how to negotiate, how to lead, how to survive in this industry. And now he's taking everything your father built. Raina closed her eyes. Why? Because he can. Evan's voice was quiet. Because men like Harold don't see people. They see assets. And when an asset becomes inconvenient, they liquidate it. Raina was silent for a long moment. Then she opened her eyes and turned back to Evan, her expression hard. What do? We expose him, publicly, undeniably, and we kill the Cerberus deal before he can execute the final play. How? Evan hesitated. This was the moment. The point where he either told her the whole truth or kept lying, and he was so damn tired of lying. There's more, he said quietly. The conspiracy isn't just Harold and Gideon. There's an algorithm, Argent. It's been used to engineer every crisis your company's faced over the past 6 months. Stock manipulation, market timing, coordinated attacks designed to look organic. Raina's eyes narrowed. How is that possible? Because I built it. Evan's voice was flat. 3 years ago. It was supposed to be a predictive tool for risk analysis, but someone stole it, weaponized it, and now it's being used to destroy you. Raina stared at him. You built the weapon they're using against me. Yes. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning before now? I didn't know it was still active until this morning. Evan's voice was hard. But now I do. And if you sign that contract, Argent will execute a flash crash at market close Friday. Your stock will collapse, the dilution clause will trigger, and Harold and Gideon will own your company before the markets even open Monday morning. Raina's face went pale. Can you stop it? I can kill it, but I need time, access, and someone on the inside of the trading platforms who can execute the shutdown sequence without triggering alarms. You have someone? Yes. Raina exhaled slowly, her mind racing. And if this goes wrong? We both go to prison. She laughed, bitter and sharp. Of course we do. Evan waited. Raina looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Do it. Whatever you need. But Evan? Yeah? If you're lying to me, she said quietly, I will personally make sure you never see your daughter again. Evan met her eyes, unflinching. If I'm lying to you, I'll deserve it. Raina held his gaze, then turned and walked out of the room. Evan stood alone in the fishbowl, surrounded by glass walls and the weight of a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. His phone buzzed, a message from the hospital. Maya's fever spiking. Please call. Evan closed his eyes. The clock was running, and he was running out of time. Evan made it to the hospital in 17 minutes, breaking every speed limit between downtown and the pediatric wing on the north side. He parked in a loading zone, didn't bother locking the car, and took the stairs 2 at a time because waiting for the elevator felt like drowning. Maya's room was on the 4th floor, 3rd door on the left. He knew it by heart. He'd walked this hallway so many times, he could do it blind. When he pushed through the door, he found her curled up in the hospital bed, small and fragile under white sheets, an IV line running into her arm. Her face was flushed with fever, her breathing shallow. Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor who watched Maya when Evan worked nights, sat in the chair beside the bed, her weathered hands folded in her lap, worry etched deep in the lines of her face. She looked up when Evan entered. She spiked to 103 an hour ago. They're running tests now. Evan moved to the bedside, his chest tight. Has the doctor been in? 20 minutes ago. He said they're checking for infections, but her counts are low. The medication isn't working like it should. Evan pressed his hand against Maya's forehead. She was burning up. He looked at Mrs. Alvarez. Did they say anything else? Mrs. Alvarez hesitated, and Evan saw the answer in her eyes before she spoke. They want to try a new treatment protocol, she said quietly. Stronger drugs, more aggressive. But it's expensive, Evan. Very expensive. Of course it was. Evan sank into the chair on the other side of the bed and took Maya's hand. Her fingers were small, hot, trembling slightly, even in sleep. He'd been fighting for 2 years to keep her stable, to afford the medications, to buy time until something better came along. And now time was running out faster than he could catch it. How expensive? He asked quietly. Mrs. Alvarez looked away. The doctor said without insurance authorization, It's 30,000 for the first round. Maybe more, depending on how she responds. 30,000. Evan had maybe $400 in his bank account. The rest went to rent, food, the medications that were barely keeping Maya alive. He'd been scraping by on night shifts and overtime, living one paycheck away from disaster, and now disaster had arrived. "I'll figure it out," Evan said, his voice hollow. Mrs. Alvarez reached across the bed and squeezed his shoulder. "I know you will. You always do." But this time, Evan wasn't sure. He'd burned every bridge, cashed in every favor, exhausted every option. There was nothing left to sell, nothing left to sacrifice. Except maybe one thing. Raina had promised him any price if he stopped the conspiracy. She'd said it without hesitation, without limits. And Evan had believed her because people like Raina Mercer didn't make promises they couldn't keep. Which meant if he pulled this off, if he exposed Harold, killed the Cerberus deal, and dismantled Argent before it executed, he could save Maya. He just had to survive the next 36 hours first. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy?" Evan leaned closer, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Hey, sweetheart. I'm here. You came back. Always." She looked at him with those big, serious eyes that saw too much for a 7-year-old. "You're sad." "I'm tired," Evan said, brushing her hair back gently. "But I'm okay." "You're lying again." Evan's throat tightened. "Maybe a little." Maya's hand tightened around his. "Are you going to fix it?" "Yeah, I'm going to fix it." "Promise?" Evan looked at his daughter, small, sick, impossibly brave, and felt something crack inside his chest. "I promise," he whispered. Maya smiled, just barely, and closed her eyes again. Evan sat with her until the fever broke slightly, until her breathing evened out, until the nurse came in to check her vitals and told him visiting hours were over. He kissed Maya's forehead, whispered that he loved her, and walked out of the hospital into the cold Seattle night, feeling like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. His phone buzzed. A message from Miles. "We need to talk. Now." Bam. They met in a 24-hour diner on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where the coffee was terrible and the fluorescent lights made everyone look half dead. Miles was already in a booth when Evan arrived, 2 cups of coffee on the table, his laptop open, his face pale. Evan slid into the seat across from him. "What happened?" Miles turned the laptop around. The screen showed a live trading feed, streams of data scrolling past faster than the human eye could follow. But embedded in the chaos was a pattern, subtle, almost invisible, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Argent was warming up. "It's running diagnostic sequences," Miles said quietly, "testing execution pathways, verifying access points, confirming liquidity pools. This is pre-launch behavior, Evan. It's getting ready to fire." Evan's pulse spiked. "When?" "I don't know, but based on the pattern frequency, I'd say sometime in the next 18 to 24 hours, which meant Friday morning, right around the time Raina was supposed to sign the Cerberus contract." Evan leaned back, his mind racing. "Can you trace the origin?" "I tried. The system's routing through a dozen offshore servers, each one encrypted 6 ways from Sunday. Whoever's running this knows what they're doing." Miles paused. "But I found something else." He pulled up another screen, a series of encrypted communication logs, fragmented, incomplete, but readable enough to piece together the conversation. Evan scanned the text, his blood running cold. The messages were between 2 users, codenames only. The first was labeled Architect. The second was Hammer. And they were discussing the final execution. Architect. Signature confirmed for 9 a.m. Friday. Proceed with Phase 3 on schedule. Hammer. Acknowledged. Argent primed. Market impact estimated at 34% decline within first hour. Recovery impossible. Architect. Acceptable. Ensure board vote follows immediately. Transition must be seamless. Hammer. Understood. What about the janitor? Evan's stomach dropped. Architect. Irrelevant. If he's found anything, it's too late to matter. Mercer will sign. The rest is gravity. Miles looked at Evan. They know you're digging. They don't know what I've found, Evan said quietly. Not yet, but they're watching. Which means we're running out of time. Miles closed the laptop. If Argent executes, It doesn't just crash Mercer Global's stock. It'll trigger a cascade across every linked security, every correlated asset, every automated trading system designed to react to volatility. We're talking billions in losses, maybe trillions if it spreads to the broader markets. Evan's jaw tightened. Then we shut it down before it fires. How? Miles leaned forward. Evan, this thing is locked behind layers of encryption I can't break, hosted on servers I can't access, controlled by people who've already proven they'll destroy anyone who gets in their way. Even if we had the technical capacity to kill it, we don't have the time. We have the kill switch. Miles went very still. The what? When I built Argent, I knew it could be dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands, so I built in a failsafe, a sequence of micro-trades so statistically impossible that if they're executed in exactly the right order, the system interprets it as a fatal error and shuts itself down. Miles stared at him. You're telling me you built a backdoor into your own algorithm and didn't mention it until now? I'm mentioning it now. Does it work? In theory. In theory? Miles's voice climbed. Evan, we're talking about executing a series of trades designed to crash a weaponized algorithm in the middle of a market manipulation scheme orchestrated by billionaires with unlimited resources. This is not the time for theory. It's the only option we have, Evan said flatly. The kill switch works. I tested it before the algorithm was stolen, but it requires ultra-low latency access to the exchanges, precise timing down to the millisecond, and a trader willing to execute trades that will look completely insane to anyone monitoring the system. Miles was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, bitter and sharp. You're asking me to commit professional suicide again. I'm asking you to stop the people who destroyed us both. Miles rubbed his face, exhaustion and fear warring in his expression. If this goes wrong, we don't just lose our careers, Evan. We go to prison for market manipulation. If we don't try, people lose everything. Evan's voice was quiet but hard. Raina, her employees, the investors who trusted her, everyone connected to Mercer Global, and then Harold and Gideon move on to the next target and the next until there's nothing left but ashes. Miles stared at his coffee, his hands trembling slightly. I rebuilt my life, man. It took 3 years. I'm finally stable, finally safe. And you're asking me to throw it all away on a plan that might not even work. I'm asking you to be the man I used to know, Evan said quietly. The one who believed in doing the right thing even when it cost him everything. Miles closed his eyes. That man got destroyed. No, he got beaten. There's a difference. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of pain, betrayal, and loss. Finally, Miles opened his eyes and met Evan's gaze. When do we execute? He asked quietly. Friday morning, right before the signature. We give Raina every second we can to stall, and then we fire the kill switch the moment Argent starts warming up for the crash. Miles nodded slowly. I'll need access to a high-frequency trading terminal, something with direct market access, co-located servers, latency under 10 microseconds. Can you get it? Maybe. I know a guy who runs a prop trading firm downtown. He owes me a favor. Miles hesitated. But Evan, even if this works, Harold and Gideon will know someone killed their algorithm. They'll come looking. Let them. Evan's voice was cold. By the time they figure out what happened, they'll be in handcuffs. Miles studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'm in. But you need to promise me something. What? If this goes sideways, if we get caught, if everything falls apart, you get Maya somewhere safe. You don't let them use her as leverage. Evan's chest tightened. I won't. Promise me, Evan. I promise. Miles exhaled slowly, then reached across the table and shook Evan's hand. Okay, let's burn it all down. Damn. Evan didn't sleep that night. He went back to the fishbowl office at Onyx Tower and worked through the darkness, building the case against Harold piece by piece. Transaction records, communication logs, video evidence. He compiled everything into a single encrypted file, created redundant backups, and buried them in locations where even if he was arrested, someone would eventually find them. By dawn, he had a prosecutable case. By 7 a.m., he had a plan. And by 8, Raina walked into the fishbowl with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that suggested she hadn't slept either. "Tell me you have something," she said, setting one of the cups in front of him. Evan gestured to the monitor. "Everything. Harold's payments, the ghost account, the video, the Argent execution logs, enough to bury him and Gideon for the next 20 years. Raina leaned against the desk, her eyes scanning the data. "And the algorithm?" "My partner's in position. We execute the kill switch tomorrow morning, right before you're scheduled to sign." "Your partner?" Raina's eyes narrowed. "The one you didn't mention until now." "Miles Carter, former quantitative analyst. He helped me build the original Argent system. If anyone can kill it, he can." Raina was silent for a moment. "And if he can't?" "Then we lose." "That's not acceptable." "It's reality." Evan met her gaze. "But Miles is good, Miss Mercer. Better than anyone I've ever worked with. If there's a way to stop this, he'll find it." Raina studied him, searching for cracks, for doubt, for any sign that he was lying. Then she nodded once. "All right, but there's a problem." "What?" "Harold called an emergency board meeting for tonight, 8 p.m. He's pushing to finalize the Cerberus vote before tomorrow's signature deadline." Raina's jaw tightened. "If the board votes to approve tonight, I won't have the authority to stall tomorrow. They'll force me to sign." Evan's pulse spiked. Can you delay the vote?" "I can try. But Harold has influence. If he's convinced the rest of the board that this deal is our only option, they'll override me." "Then we show them the evidence tonight." Raina shook her head. "If we expose Harold before we've killed Argent, he'll trigger the crash early. We'll lose everything before we can stop it." Evan leaned back, his mind racing. She was right. They were trapped between 2 impossible choices: expose the conspiracy and risk early execution, or stay silent and lose the authority to fight back, unless they changed the game entirely. "What if you didn't show them the evidence?" Evan said slowly. "What if you just planted doubt?" Raina frowned. "How?" "By making them question the deal without revealing why. Ask the right questions. Point out the impossible benchmarks. Force Harold to defend clauses he can't explain without exposing himself." Evan met her eyes. "You don't need to prove he's guilty tonight. You just need to buy us 12 more hours." Raina was silent, her mind working through the strategy. Then she smiled, sharp, cold, dangerous. "I can do that." "Good." Evan stood. "And I'll be listening. If Harold slips up, if he says anything that confirms the conspiracy, I'll have it recorded." "You're bugging the boardroom?" "I'm protecting your company." Raina studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Do it." "But Evan?" "Yeah?" "Be careful. Harold's not stupid. If he realizes we're on to him, he'll disappear before we can touch him." "He won't realize." Evan's voice was quiet. "Because as far as he knows, I'm just a janitor who got lucky." Raina's expression softened, just barely. "You're a lot more than that." Evan didn't answer. He just turned back to the monitor and kept working. Masa. The emergency board meeting started at exactly 8 p.m. in the executive conference room on the 47th floor. The room was long, elegant, dominated by a massive table and walls of glass that looked out over the Seattle skyline. 10 people sat around the table, board members, executives, advisors, all of them tense, all of them exhausted. Harold Wexler sat at the far end, calm and composed, looking every inch the trusted mentor. Raina sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. And 4 floors below, in a supply closet converted into a makeshift surveillance post, Evan sat with headphones on, listening to every word through a microphone he'd planted in the air vent earlier that afternoon. Harold opened the meeting with a tone of quiet urgency. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know it's late, but we're facing a critical deadline tomorrow morning, and I believe we need to finalize our position tonight." Martin Reeves, the CFO, nodded. "Agreed. Gideon Vale's takeover bid goes live at noon if we don't have the Cerberus deal signed by 9 a.m. We're out of time to debate." "Then let's not debate," Raina said quietly. "Let's discuss." Harold glanced at her. "What's there to discuss? We've reviewed the contract. The board voted to approve it. All that's left is the signature." "The board voted based on incomplete information," Raina said. And I'd like to revisit some of the terms before we commit to a deal that could fundamentally alter the structure of this company. Diana Chen, the legal head, frowned. What terms specifically? Raina leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Section 12, Clause 4A, the mandatory convertible stock provision. I want to understand why the performance benchmarks are set 15% above our current operating metrics. Harold's expression didn't change. Those benchmarks are standard for deals of this size. They're designed to ensure the company remains focused on growth. They're designed to be impossible, Raina said flatly. We'd need a 30% revenue increase in Q1 alone. That's not growth. That's fantasy. Martin shifted uncomfortably. Raina, we've been over this. The benchmarks are ambitious, yes, but they're achievable with the right strategy. Show me the strategy. Raina's voice was calm but hard. Show me a realistic scenario where we hit those numbers given our current market position, supply chain issues, and competitive landscape. Silence. Martin glanced at Harold. Harold smiled, calm and reassuring. Raina, I understand your concern, but we're not signing this deal because it's easy. We're signing it because it's necessary. Cerberus is offering us capital, strategic partnerships, and market access that we can't get anywhere else. Yes, the benchmarks are aggressive, but if we don't take this risk, we lose everything to Gideon anyway. And if we take the risk and fail? Raina pressed. What happens when we miss the first benchmark? What happens to my ownership stake? Harold's smile thinned. The contract includes provisions for renegotiation. The contract includes a dilution clause that reduces my ownership below the controlling threshold. Raina's eyes locked on Harold's. Which means if we miss even one benchmark, Cerberus can force a restructuring. They can replace me. They can dismantle everything my father built. Another board member, an older woman named Patricia Lawson, spoke up. Is that true, Harold? Harold spread his hands. It's a standard risk mitigation clause. Cerberus is investing significant capital. They need assurances that the company will perform. If we're confident in our ability to meet the benchmarks, the clause is irrelevant. And if we're not confident, Raina asked quietly. Harold met her gaze. Then we shouldn't be running this company. The room went cold. Raina leaned back, her expression unreadable. I see. Raina. Harold's voice softened. I know this is difficult. Your father trusted me to help protect this company, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. But we're out of options. If we don't sign tomorrow, Gideon takes everything. At least with Cerberus, we have a fighting chance. Raina was silent for a long moment, then she looked around the table. I want 24 hours to review alternative options. Martin shook his head. We don't have 24 hours. The deadline is 9 a.m. Then I'll work through the night. To what end? Harold's voice was patient, almost pitying. Raina, there are no alternatives. We've explored every option. This is it. Raina's jaw tightened. Then I want the board to formally acknowledge that by signing this deal, we're accepting the risk of losing majority control within 6 months. Patricia frowned. Is that really necessary? Yes. Raina's voice was hard. Because if this goes wrong, I want it on record that we knew the risks and proceeded anyway. Harold studied her, his eyes sharp. You're stalling. I'm being thorough. You're wasting time we don't have. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Raina held Harold's gaze unflinching. Finally, Diana spoke up. I think Raina's request is reasonable. If we're committing to a deal with this level of risk, it should be documented. Harold's expression flickered, just barely, but Evan caught it through the audio feed. Frustration, impatience, the first crack in the facade. Fine, Harold said quietly. We'll add a formal risk acknowledgement to the board minutes, but the vote stands. We sign tomorrow at 9 a.m. Raina nodded once. Agreed. The meeting adjourned 10 minutes later, the board members filing out in tense silence. Evan listened as footsteps echoed across the room, as doors opened and closed, as the building settled back into quiet. And then he heard it, Harold's voice, low and sharp, speaking to someone who'd stayed behind. She knows something. A second voice, male, unfamiliar. How much? Enough to stall, not enough to stop us. Harold paused. Increase surveillance on the janitor. If he's found anything, I want to know about it before morning. And if he has? Harold's voice went cold. Then we move up the timeline. Execute Argent at 8 a.m. and force the signature under duress. Messy, but effective. Evan's blood ran cold. They were going to trigger the crash early, which meant he and Miles had even less time than they thought. Evan ripped off the headphones and grabbed his phone, typing a message to Miles with shaking hands. They're moving up the timeline. Argent executes 8 a.m. Friday. We need to be ready. Miles's reply came instantly. That gives us less than 12 hours. Can we do it? Evan stared at the screen, his mind racing. He thought about Maya, small and sick in a hospital bed. He thought about Raina, fighting to save her father's legacy. He thought about Miles, risking everything on a plan that might not work. And he thought about Harold Wexler, sitting in a boardroom, calmly discussing the destruction of lives like it was just another business transaction. Evan typed back, "We don't have a choice." Then he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. The final countdown had begun. Evan met Miles at the prop trading firm at 3 in the morning, a nondescript building wedged between a parking garage and a shuttered restaurant in the financial district. The firm operated out of the 6th floor, behind reinforced doors and security systems designed to keep out everyone except the dozen traders who worked there around the clock, chasing microseconds and millions. Miles had called in his favor. The owner, a former colleague named Derek Chen, who'd survived the same purge that destroyed Evan and Miles 3 years ago, had agreed to give them access for exactly 4 hours. No questions asked, no records kept, just 4 hours to save the world or destroy themselves trying. Derek met them at the door, a thin man in his 40s with the exhausted eyes of someone who'd been staring at screens for too long. He didn't shake hands, he just looked at Evan like he was seeing a ghost. "You're really him," Derek said quietly. "Yeah. I thought you were dead." "I got better." Derek's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Miles said you need terminal access. Full depth of market, co-located servers, sub-10 microsecond latency." "That's right. And you're not going to tell me why?" "No." Derek studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Terminal 3. It's already configured. You've got until 7 a.m. Then I shut you down whether you're done or not. Understood?" "Understood." Derek gestured them inside and locked the door behind them. The trading floor was smaller than Evan expected. Just a single room lined with workstations, each one glowing with multiple monitors, market data streaming past in rivers of green and red. 2 traders sat at opposite ends of the room, headphones on, lost in their own private wars against the markets. They didn't look up when Evan and Miles entered. Miles led Evan to Terminal 3 and pulled out a chair. "This is it. Direct market access to every major exchange. Latency optimized down to 8 microseconds, and enough bandwidth to execute 1,000 trades a second if we need to." Evan sat down, his hands resting on the keyboard. It had been 3 years since he'd touched a setup like this. 3 years since he'd felt the electric hum of being connected to the markets, to the pulse of billions of dollars moving through invisible networks at the speed of light. It felt like coming home. It felt like walking into a trap. Miles pulled up a second chair and logged into his own system. "All right, walk me through the kill switch sequence." Evan pulled up a schematic on the screen, a complex diagram of trade orders, timing windows, and execution parameters that looked more like a circuit board than a trading strategy. "Argent is designed to identify and exploit patterns in market volatility," Evan said, his voice quiet and focused. "It uses layered prediction models to anticipate price movements before they happen, then executes trades that amplify those movements into cascading failures. It's elegant because it doesn't create the volatility, it just accelerates what's already there." Miles leaned closer, studying the diagram. "So how do we stop it?" "By feeding it a pattern it can't process." Evan highlighted a series of trade sequences. The kill switch is a set of micro trades executed in a specific order across multiple securities. Each trade individually looks random, statistically insignificant, but when the algorithm analyzes them as a group, it identifies a pattern that violates its core prediction models. "What kind of pattern?" "One that suggests simultaneous causality in opposite directions. A logical impossibility." Evan's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up execution windows. The system interprets it as a fatal error in its data feed and shuts down to prevent executing trades based on corrupted information. Miles stared at the screen. That's insane. That's the point. Argent is designed to be bulletproof against conventional attacks, but it's also designed to be cautious. If it detects data it can't trust, it defaults to safety mode and halts execution. And you tested this? In simulation, yes. In live markets? Evan shook his head. Never had the chance. The algorithm was stolen before I could finish the implementation. Miles exhaled slowly. So we're betting everything on a theory. We're betting everything on math. Evan met his eyes. And the math is sound. Miles was silent for a moment, then nodded. All right, show me the execution sequence. For the next 2 hours, they mapped out every detail of the kill switch. 37 individual trades across 12 different securities, timed to execute within a 4-second window, each one precisely calibrated to create the impossible pattern that would trick Argent into shutting itself down. The margin for error was 0. If they executed too early, Argent wouldn't be active yet, and the trades would just be noise. If they executed too late, the crash would already be underway, and stopping it would be impossible. And if they missed the timing by even a fraction of a second, the pattern would break and the kill switch would fail. We need to know the exact moment Argent starts warming up for execution, Miles said, pulling up real-time market feeds. The diagnostic sequences you saw yesterday give us a window, but we need precision. Evan pulled out his phone and opened an encrypted connection to the monitoring system he'd set up in the fishbowl office. The screen showed a live feed of Argent's activity logs, data flowing in from the offshore servers that controlled the algorithm. I've been tracking the pattern cycles, Evan said. Every time Argent runs a diagnostic, it leaves a signature in the transaction data, a specific sequence of test orders that hit and cancel within milliseconds. When those sequences accelerate to a critical frequency, it means execution is imminent. Miles studied the feed. How much lead time does that give us? Maybe 90 seconds. 2 minutes if we're lucky. That's not enough time to manually execute 37 trades, which is why we're automating it. Evan pulled up a script he'd been working on all night, a program designed to monitor Argent's signature, detect the critical frequency, and trigger the kill switch sequence automatically. The moment the algorithm starts warming up, this fires. No human delay, no room for error. Miles read through the code, his eyes scanning each line with the precision of someone who'd spent years building systems that could make or lose millions in microseconds. It's solid, he said finally, but there's a problem. What? If Argent's controllers are monitoring their own system, which they have to be, they'll see our trades the moment they execute. They'll know someone's trying to kill it. Let them know, Evan said quietly. By the time they figure out what we're doing, it'll be too late. Miles looked at him. You're assuming they won't have a countermeasure. I'm assuming they won't expect anyone to know the kill switch exists. Evan's voice was hard. Because the only people who knew about it were me and the team that built the original algorithm. And that team doesn't exist anymore. Except for us. Except for us. Miles was silent, weighing the risks, calculating the odds. Then he nodded once. All right, let's set it up. They spent the next hour integrating the script into the trading terminal, running simulation after simulation to verify the timing, the sequencing, the execution pathways. Every test came back clean, the math was sound, the logic was bulletproof. But Evan couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. At 5:30 a.m., Derek appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that suggested he regretted every decision that had led to this moment. You've got 90 minutes, he said, setting the cups down. Then I pull the plug whether you're ready or not. We'll be done by then, Miles said. Derek looked at Evan. I don't know what you're doing, and I don't want to know, but whatever it is, be careful. The people who destroyed you the first time are still out there, and they don't forgive. Evan met his eyes. Neither do I. Derek held his gaze for a moment, then nodded and walked away. Evan turned back to the monitors, his pulse steady, his mind clear. This was it. The final countdown. In less than 3 hours, Argent would execute, the markets would crash, and Reina would lose everything, unless he and Miles could pull off a miracle. His phone buzzed, a message from Reyna. Harold's pushing the board to convene at 7:30 instead of 8 on tick. He wants the vote finalized before market open. How much time do you need? Evan's chest tightened. If the board meeting started at 7:30, that gave them even less room to maneuver. He typed back, "We execute the moment Argent goes live. Keep stalling as long as you can." Reyna's reply came instantly. "I'll do my best. But Evan, if this doesn't work, I won't be able to stop them from forcing the signature." Evan stared at the screen, then typed, "It'll work." He didn't know if he believed it, but he needed her to. Another message appeared, this one from the hospital. "Maya's stable. Fever broke overnight. Doctor wants to discuss treatment options this afternoon." Evan closed his eyes, relief and fear warring inside him. Maya was stable. For now. But stable wasn't cured. Stable wasn't safe. Stable was just another word for running out of time. He pocketed the phone and turned to Miles. "We need to talk about contingencies." Miles looked up. "What kind of contingencies?" "If the kill switch fails. If Argent executes anyway. If we get caught." Evan's voice was quiet. "I need to know Maya's protected." Miles's expression softened. "She will be. I've already set up an encrypted fund transfer. If anything happens to us, the money goes straight to a trust in her name. Medical expenses, living costs, everything she needs until she's 18. Evan's throat tightened. "How much?" "Enough." Miles met his eyes. "I sold everything I had left, Evan. My apartment, my car, my trading accounts. It's not a fortune, but it'll keep her safe." Evan stared at him, unable to speak. Miles smiled, sad and tired. "You're not the only one who knows how to sacrifice for the people you love." Evan reached across the desk and gripped Miles's shoulder. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive the next 2 hours." At 6:45, the market feed started shifting. Subtle changes in liquidity patterns, minor fluctuations in pre-market trading volumes, microscopic anomalies that most people would have missed. But Evan didn't miss them. "Argent's starting to move," he said quietly. Miles pulled up the diagnostic feed. The signature sequences were accelerating, cycling faster, building toward the critical frequency that would trigger execution. "It's early," Miles said. "You said 8 a.m. Harold moved up the timeline. Evan's hands flew across the keyboard, adjusting parameters, recalibrating thresholds. "They're not waiting for the board vote. They're executing now and forcing the signature under duress. Can we compensate? We have to." The monitors blazed with data, streams of numbers cascading faster than human eyes could follow. Evan's script was running, watching, waiting for the exact moment when Argent crossed from diagnostic mode into active execution. And then it happened. The signature frequency spiked, the pattern shifted, and somewhere in the invisible networks that connected markets around the world, a weaponized algorithm woke up and prepared to burn everything it touched. "Now," Evan said. Miles hit the execute button. The kill switch sequence fired. 37 trades launched simultaneously across 12 securities, each one hitting the market with microsecond precision, each one perfectly timed to create the impossible pattern that would trick Argent into believing its data feed was corrupted. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The markets pulsed, the data flowed, and Argent kept warming up. "It's not working," Miles said, his voice tight. "Give it time." "We don't have time." And then the signature flickered. Evan's heart stopped. On the diagnostic feed, Argent's pattern cycles stuttered, hesitated, distorted. The algorithm was analyzing the kill switch trades, running them through its prediction models, trying to make sense of a pattern that violated every rule of causality and correlation it had been designed to understand. The frequency dropped. The cycles slowed. And then, like a machine realizing it had been poisoned, Argent shut down. The diagnostic feed went dark. The signature vanished. The markets stabilized. Miles stared at the screen, his hands shaking. "Did we just—" "Yeah," Evan breathed. "We did." For a moment, they just sat there in stunned silence, the weight of what they'd accomplished pressing down on them like gravity. They'd killed a weaponized algorithm. They'd stopped a market crash. They'd saved Reyna's company, and they'd done it with 90 seconds to spare. Miles laughed, sharp and breathless. I can't believe that worked. Neither can I, Evan admitted. So what now? Evan pulled out his phone and opened the encrypted file containing all the evidence against Harold and Gideon. The video, the transaction records, the communication logs, everything. Now we finish it, he said quietly. He forwarded the file to Raina with a single message. Argent is dead. Show them everything. Then he leaned back in the chair and waited. In the executive conference room on the 47th floor of Onyx Tower, Raina Mercer stood at the head of the table, facing a board that looked like they'd already decided her fate. Harold sat at the far end, calm and composed, his expression unreadable. We need to vote, Martin Reeves said, his voice tight. The deadline is in 15 minutes. If we don't finalize this now, we lose our chance. Raina didn't move. Her phone had just buzzed with Evan's message, and she could feel the weight of the evidence burning in her pocket. Before we vote, she said quietly, I have something you all need to see. Harold's eyes narrowed. Raina, we don't have time for... Make time. She pulled out her phone, connected it to the conference room display, and hit play. The video filled the screen. Harold's face went pale. The board watched in stunned silence as Harold and Gideon discussed the conspiracy, the trap built into the Cerberus deal, the plan to force Raina out, the casual cruelty of men who saw companies as nothing more than assets to be stripped and sold. When the video ended, the room was silent. Patricia Lawson spoke first, her voice shaking with fury. Harold, is this real? Harold didn't answer. He just stood slowly, his hands resting on the table, his expression locked down tight. It's fabricated, he said finally. Someone's trying to sabotage this deal. Really? Raina pulled up the transaction records. Then explain the ghost account. Explain the 18 months of payments to Pinnacle Systems Group. Explain how you've been funneling company funds to an offshore shell corporation controlled by Gideon Vale. Harold's jaw tightened. Those are legitimate consulting fees. For a company that doesn't exist, Raina's voice was cold. For services that were never rendered. For a conspiracy designed to destroy everything my father built. Martin stared at Harold. Tell me she's wrong. Harold didn't answer. Diana Chen stood, her face hard. I'm calling the authorities. Wait. Harold's voice was quiet but sharp. Before you do something you'll regret, you should know that the Cerberus deal isn't the only leverage in play here. Raina's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Harold smiled, cold and thin. Argent. The algorithm that's been orchestrating your company's decline for the past 6 months. It's still active, and if I don't send a shutdown code in the next 10 minutes, it executes a cascade that will crash your stock price so hard you'll be bankrupt by noon. The room went cold. You're bluffing, Raina said. Am I? Harold pulled out his phone. One message, Raina. That's all it takes. You expose me, I trigger the crash. We both lose. Raina held his gaze, her mind racing. Harold didn't know Argent was already dead. He didn't know Evan and Miles had killed it. He was betting everything on a weapon that no longer existed. She smiled. Go ahead, she said quietly. Send the message. Harold's expression flickered. You think I'm bluffing. I think you're desperate. Raina crossed her arms. And I think the algorithm you're threatening me with was shut down 20 minutes ago by the same people you tried to destroy 3 years ago. Harold went very still. Evan Cross says hello, Raina said softly. For the first time, Harold's composure cracked. His hand tightened around his phone, his eyes searching hers for any sign of deception. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Stop him, Raina said. 2 security guards stepped into the hallway, blocking Harold's path. He looked at them, then back at Raina, his expression finally showing the fear he'd been hiding. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. I saved my company. Raina's voice was hard. And ended yours. The guards took Harold by the arms and led him out of the room. Diana was already on the phone with the authorities. Martin sat frozen, staring at the evidence on the screen. Patricia looked at Raina with something like respect. You knew, Patricia said quietly. You knew before tonight. I had help, Raina said. From a janitor? Raina smiled. from the best analyst I've ever met. Back. Evan and Miles left the trading firm at 7:30, walking out into the cold Seattle morning like men who'd just survived a battle. Derek stood in the doorway watching them go, his expression unreadable. "You did good," he called after them. Evan turned back. "Thank you." Derek nodded once. "Don't come back." Evan smiled. "Deal." They walked to the parking garage in silence, exhaustion pressing down on them like a weight. Miles looked like he hadn't slept in days. Evan felt like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "What now?" Miles asked. "Now we wait," Evan said. "Raina exposes Harold. The authorities arrest him and Gideon. The evidence goes public, and we disappear before anyone asks too many questions." Miles nodded slowly. "And Maya?" "Gets the treatment she needs." Evan's voice softened. Finally. They reached Evan's car, the battered Honda that had carried him through 3 years of night shifts and impossible choices. Miles stopped, looking at Evan like he was seeing him for the first time. "You did it," Miles said quietly. "You took down the people who destroyed us both." "We did it," Evan corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." Miles extended his hand. Evan shook it, and for a moment they just stood there, two men who'd lost everything and clawed their way back to something like redemption. "Take care of yourself," Miles said. "You too." Miles walked away, disappearing into the morning light. Evan stood alone in the parking garage, his phone buzzing with messages. One from Raina. "It's done. Harold's in custody. Gideon's lawyers are already scrambling. You saved us." Another from the hospital. "Doctors ready to discuss treatment. Can you come in?" And a third, from a number he didn't recognize. "You should have stayed dead. This isn't over." Evan stared at the last message, his blood running cold. Harold was in custody. Gideon was exposed. Argent was destroyed. But somewhere out there, someone else was watching. Someone who knew who Evan was, what he'd done, and how to find him. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for now, Evan had something more important to do. He got in his car, started the engine, and drove to the hospital to see his daughter. Because no matter what came next, Maya came first. Always. Maya was awake when Evan walked into her hospital room, sitting up in bed with a coloring book spread across her lap and crayons scattered around her like confetti. She looked better than she had in weeks. Her color was back, her eyes were bright, and when she saw him, she smiled like the sun breaking through clouds. "Daddy!" Evan crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around her, careful not to disturb the IV line still running into her arm. She felt warm, but not feverish, solid but still too light, and when she hugged him back, he had to close his eyes against the wave of relief that threatened to break him. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered. "You look tired." "I am tired." Maya pulled back and studied his face with those serious eyes that saw too much. "Did you fix it?" Evan thought about Harold in handcuffs, Gideon's empire collapsing, Argent reduced to nothing but dead code scattered across servers that would be seized by federal agents before the day was out. He thought about Raina standing in that boardroom, finally free of the trap that had been closing around her for months. He thought about Miles, walking away into the morning light with his dignity restored and his future uncertain, but his own. "Yeah," Evan said quietly. "I fixed it." Maya smiled. "I knew you would." The door opened and Dr. Sarah Okonkwo entered, a tall woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the steady presence of someone who'd spent 30 years delivering impossible news to desperate families. She carried a tablet and wore an expression that Evan couldn't quite read. "Mr. Cross," she said, "I'm glad you're here. We need to talk about Maya's treatment plan." Evan stood, his heart hammering. "Is she okay?" "She's stable." Dr. Okonkwo gestured toward the hallway. "But we should discuss this privately." Evan looked at Maya. "I'll be right back, okay?" Maya nodded and went back to her coloring book, humming softly to herself. Out in the hallway, Dr. Okonkwo pulled up Maya's chart on her tablet and showed Evan a series of test results that looked like a foreign language written in medical abbreviations and color-coded graphs. "The new protocol I mentioned yesterday, it's aggressive, but it's also our best option for long-term management," she said. "The medications we've been using have been keeping her stable, but they're not addressing the underlying condition. We need to switch to a combination therapy that includes immunosuppressants, targeted biologics, and ongoing monitoring." Evan's throat tightened. And the cost? Dr. Okonkwo's expression softened. Without insurance authorization, we're looking at approximately $30,000 for the initial treatment cycle, then $15,000 to $20,000 per quarter for maintenance therapy. The numbers hit him like a punch. Even with what Miles had set aside, even with whatever Reyna was planning to pay him, those were numbers that stretched into the horizon with no end in sight. How long does she need the treatment? Evan asked quietly. Potentially years, maybe indefinitely. Dr. Okonkwo paused. But Mr. Cross, there's good news. I've been in contact with a specialty pharmaceutical program that provides these medications at significantly reduced costs for families in financial hardship. If we can get Maya enrolled, the quarterly costs drop to around $3,000. Evan looked up. That's real? It's real. I've already started the application process. With your income documentation and her medical history, I'm confident we can get approval within 2 weeks. For the first time in what felt like years, Evan felt something loosen in his chest. $3,000 per quarter was still a mountain, but it was a mountain he could climb, especially if Reyna kept her promise. What do I need to do? He asked. Sign the consent forms. We'll start the new protocol this afternoon. Dr. Okonkwo met his eyes. Your daughter is going to be okay, Mr. Cross. It won't be easy, but she's strong. And with the right treatment, she can live a normal, healthy life. Evan had to look away before she saw the tears he was fighting back. Thank you. You're welcome. Dr. Okonkwo handed him the tablet. Sign here, here, and here. Evan signed without reading, trusting her because he had no other choice, and because everything in her expression told him she was fighting for Maya as hard as he was. When he walked back into the room, Maya looked up from her coloring. What did the doctor say? She said you're going to get better. Maya's smile could have powered the whole city. I told you you'd fix it. Evan sat down on the edge of her bed and took her small hand in his. You're the one who's going to fix it, sweetheart. You're the strongest person I know. Stronger than you? Way stronger than me. Maya giggled, then went serious again. Daddy, are you going to keep cleaning floors? Evan paused. He hadn't thought that far ahead. The past 48 hours had been about survival, about stopping Harold and saving Reyna and keeping Maya alive. He hadn't considered what came after. I don't know yet, he said honestly. Why? Because you're too smart to clean floors. Maya spoke with the absolute certainty of a 7-year-old who believed her father could do anything. You should do important things. Evan smiled. Taking care of you is the most important thing I'll ever do. I know, but you can do both. Before Evan could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Reyna. Can you come to the office? We need to talk. Evan looked at Maya. I have to go somewhere for a little while. Mrs. Alvarez will be here soon, okay? Okay. Maya handed him a drawing, a crayon sketch of 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands under a rainbow. This is for you. Evan took the drawing, his throat tight. It's perfect. I know, Maya said matter-of-factly. I'm good at art. Evan kissed her forehead, tucked the drawing carefully into his jacket pocket, and headed for the door. Behind him, Maya called out one more time. Daddy? He turned. Yeah? I'm proud of you. Evan had faced down corrupt billionaires, dismantled weaponized algorithms, and bet everything on a plan that could have destroyed him. But those 4 words from his daughter broke him in a way nothing else could. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart, he whispered. Then he walked out before she could see him cry. Washab. Onyx Tower looked different in the daylight. The glass walls gleamed, the marble lobby sparkled, and the whole building seemed to pulse with a quiet energy that suggested life was returning to normal. Evan rode the elevator to the 47th floor, his reflection staring back at him from the polished steel walls, still wearing the gray janitor's uniform, still looking like someone who didn't belong in these spaces. But today felt different. Today, he didn't feel invisible. Reyna was waiting in her office, standing by the window with her arms crossed, looking out at the city like she was surveying a kingdom she'd just reclaimed. When Evan entered, she turned, and the expression on her face was complicated. Relief, exhaustion, gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite name. Sit, she said. gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Evan sat. Raina moved to her desk and pulled out a folder, setting it down between them. The authorities arrested Gideon Vale 2 hours ago. His lawyers are already trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence is overwhelming. He's looking at 20 years minimum. And Harold? Federal custody, fraud, conspiracy, market manipulation, breach of fiduciary duty. The charges keep stacking up. Raina's voice was hard. He'll die in prison. Evan nodded slowly. Good. The board voted unanimously to terminate the Cerberus deal and restructure our defense against any future hostile actions. Raina opened the folder. We're implementing new oversight protocols, conducting a full audit of all vendor relationships, and rebuilding our security infrastructure from the ground up. It's going to take months, maybe years, but we're going to come out of this stronger. You saved your company, Evan said quietly. No. Raina met his eyes. You saved my company. I was drowning and didn't even know it. You saw the trap, you approved the conspiracy, and you stopped a catastrophe that would have destroyed not just Mercer Global, but potentially the entire market. You did that, Evan, not me. Evan didn't know what to say. Raina pulled a document from the folder and slid it across the desk. I made you a promise. Any price if you succeeded. I'm here to keep it. Evan picked up the document. It was a contract, dense, formal, filled with legal language that took him a moment to parse. But the core terms were clear. A consulting agreement with Mercer Global Industries, annual compensation of $500,000 plus benefits, with a signing bonus of $200,000 paid immediately upon execution. Evan stared at the numbers, his mind struggling to process them. This is too much, he said quietly. It's not enough. Raina's voice was firm. You saved $8 billion worth of company value, protected thousands of jobs, and exposed a conspiracy that would have kept destroying companies until someone stopped it. $500,000 is a fraction of what you're worth. I'm a janitor. You're a quantitative analyst who happens to clean floors at night to pay for your daughter's medical treatment. Raina leaned forward. And you're done cleaning floors, Evan. I want to hire you, legitimately, officially, as the head of a new risk analysis division responsible for identifying and neutralizing threats to the company before they become catastrophic. Evan looked up, stunned. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career. Raina's eyes were steady. The same career Harold and Gideon stole from you 3 years ago. I can't give you back the time you lost, and I can't undo the damage they did to your reputation. But I can give you a chance to rebuild, to use your skills for something that matters, to provide for Maya without having to sacrifice your dignity or your future. Evan set the contract down, his hands shaking slightly. Why? Because you're brilliant, because you're trustworthy, because you proved that when everything was on the line, you chose to do the right thing, even when it cost you everything. Raina paused. And because I need someone I can trust to make sure this never happens again. Evan was silent for a long moment, staring at the contract that represented everything he'd lost and everything he might still have. A real salary. Benefits. Health insurance that would cover Maya's treatments without bankrupting him. Stability. Security. A future. What about my record? He asked quietly. The insider trading charges. Even though I was cleared, the stain doesn't go away. Other companies wouldn't hire me. Why would you? Because I did my homework. Or Raina pulled out another document, a comprehensive background investigation that must have cost a fortune to compile. I had my legal team pull every record, every document, every piece of evidence related to your case. You were framed, Evan, systematically and deliberately. Harold fed you false information, manipulated your trades, and made sure the paper trail pointed directly at you. You were a scapegoat, not a criminal. Evan's jaw tightened. I know that. The courts know that. But the market doesn't care. Once you're accused, you're guilty forever in the eyes of the industry. Then we changed the industry's eyes. Raina's voice was hard. I'm going public with everything. Harold's conspiracy, the framing, the way he destroyed your career to cover his tracks. By the time I'm done, everyone will know you were the victim, not the villain. Your name gets cleared, your reputation gets restored, and you get the career you should have had all along. Evan stared at her, something close to hope stirring in his chest for the first time in 3 years. There's one condition, Raina said. What? You take the job, you sign the contract, and you stop hiding. Her eyes softened. You're not invisible anymore, Evan. You never were. You just convinced yourself you had to be to survive. But you don't. Not anymore. Evan looked down at the contract, at the numbers that could change Maya's life, at the title that represented everything he'd thought he'd lost forever. Head of Risk Analysis, Mercer Global Industries. A second chance. He picked up the pen Raina had placed beside the contract. If I sign this, he said quietly, I'm putting a target on my back. The people Harold worked with, the ones who sent me that threatening message, they're still out there. They'll come after me. Let them try. Raina's voice was cold. I've got the best security team money can buy, the full weight of federal law enforcement behind the investigation, and a personal commitment to making sure no one ever hurts the people who saved my company. You're not alone in this fight anymore, Evan. You've got allies, resources, protection. Evan met her eyes. And if they come after Maya? Raina's expression went diamond hard. Then they'll have to go through me first, and I promise you, they won't make it. Evan believed her. He signed the contract. Raina took it, examined the signature, then extended her hand across the desk. Welcome to Mercer Global, Mr. Cross. Evan shook her hand, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt like himself again. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Raina smiled. You start Monday, and I'm putting you to work immediately. We've got 6 months of damage to repair and an entire company to rebuild. I'll be ready. I know you will. Raina stood. Now go be with your daughter. She needs you more than I do right now. Evan stood, tucked the signed contract into his jacket pocket beside Maya's drawing, and headed for the door. He paused in the doorway, looking back. Miss Mercer? Yes? That threatening message I got this morning, the one that said this isn't over. Evan's voice was quiet. Do you really think we're safe? Raina was silent for a moment, her expression unreadable. No, she said finally. I think we wounded something dangerous, and dangerous things fight back. But I also think we're stronger than we were yesterday. And tomorrow we'll be stronger still. She met his eyes. We'll handle whatever comes, Evan, together. Evan nodded once, then walked out. Then, 3 weeks later, Evan stood in the lobby of Onyx Tower at 8 in the morning, wearing a suit that actually fit and carrying a briefcase that didn't have mop handles sticking out of it. He wasn't cleaning the marble floors anymore. He was walking across them like he belonged there, because he did. The fishbowl office on the 32nd floor had been converted into the headquarters of Mercer Global's new Risk Analysis Division, a team of 6 analysts, 3 security specialists, and 1 former janitor who'd proven he could see traps that no one else noticed. Miles had joined the team 2 days after Evan signed his contract, bringing with him a network of contacts, a reputation for being one of the sharpest traders in the industry, and a quiet determination to make sure what happened to them never happened to anyone else. Together, they were building something new, a system designed not to exploit vulnerabilities but to protect against them, a framework that prioritized integrity over profit and people over algorithms. It was slow work, hard work, but it was good work. And every Friday, Evan left the office at 5 p.m., drove to the hospital, and spent the weekend with Maya. Her treatments were working, her color was back, her energy was returning. The doctors were cautiously optimistic that with continued therapy, she'd be able to live a normal, healthy childhood. She'd started 2nd grade 2 weeks ago, and her teacher said she was the brightest kid in the class. Evan wasn't surprised. On this particular Friday, as he was packing up his briefcase and preparing to leave, Raina appeared in his office doorway. Got a minute? She asked. Evan gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where, 3 weeks ago, she'd offered him a future he'd thought was impossible. Raina sat, holding a tablet. The federal investigation wrapped up this morning. Harold took a plea deal. 25 years, no parole. Oh. Gideon's facing similar terms. The offshore accounts have been seized, the shell corporations dissolved, and every person connected to the conspiracy is being prosecuted. Good, Evan said. There's more. Raina pulled up a document on the tablet. The investigators found evidence of 3 other companies Harold and Gideon targeted over the past 5 years. Same playbook. Infiltrate the board, engineer a crisis, force a merger, and strip the assets. Two of those companies went bankrupt. One survived but lost 70% of its value. Evan's jaw tightened. How many people lost their jobs? Thousands. Raina's voice was quiet. They've been doing this for years, Evan. You didn't just save my company. You stopped a machine designed to destroy anyone vulnerable enough to be targeted. Evan was silent, processing the scale of what they'd uncovered. The victims are filing a class action lawsuit, Raina continued, and they want you to testify, to explain how the algorithm worked, how the conspiracy was structured, how it could have been stopped sooner if anyone had known what to look for. Evan looked up. You want me to go public? I want you to help make sure this never happens again. Raina set the tablet down. You have knowledge that could change how we regulate financial markets, how we protect companies from hostile manipulation, how we hold people like Harold accountable before they destroy lives. That knowledge is too important to keep quiet. Evan thought about the message he'd received 3 weeks ago, the warning that this wasn't over, the implicit threat against anyone who tried to fight back. Then he thought about Maya, safe and healthy and proud of her father for doing important things. I'll testify, Saul, he said quietly. Raina smiled. Thank you. But I want something in return. Name it. Protection for Maya, full-time security, monitoring, whatever it takes to make sure she's safe while I'm putting a target on our backs. Done. Raina didn't hesitate. I'll have a team assigned by Monday. Evan nodded. Then I'm in. Raina stood, extending her hand one more time. You're a good man, Evan Cross. Evan shook her hand. I'm just a father trying to do right by his daughter. You're both. Raina headed for the door, then paused. By the way, the board approved a special bonus for you and Miles. Compensation for the work you did stopping Argent. It should hit your accounts Monday morning. How much? Raina smiled. Enough to cover Maya's treatments for the next 10 years, with room left over for her college fund. Evan's breath caught. Have a good weekend, Evan, Raina said softly. Then she was gone. Evan sat alone in his office, staring at the photograph on his desk, the same picture he used to keep in his apartment. Maya and him at the zoo, both smiling, both happy, both believing the world was still kind. He picked up his phone and called the hospital. Dr. Okonkwo, it's Evan Cross. I wanted to let you know, whatever Maya needs, whatever treatments, whatever specialist, whatever it takes, cost is no longer a factor. Do everything you can to help her. Dr. Okonkwo's voice was warm with understanding. We will, Mr. Cross. I promise. Evan hung up, packed his briefcase, and headed for the elevator. As he crossed the lobby, the same lobby where 4 weeks ago he'd been buffing floors and trying to stay invisible, he caught his reflection in the glass walls. He didn't look like a janitor anymore. He looked like a man who'd fought his way back from exile and won. Cheetah. 6 months later, Harold Wexler and Gideon Vale were both sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The class action lawsuit resulted in a landmark settlement that established new regulations for corporate oversight and algorithmic trading. Evan's testimony became the foundation for legislation designed to prevent the kind of systematic manipulation that had destroyed so many lives. Miles Carter was offered a position at a major hedge fund but turned it down to stay at Mercer Global, where he and Evan continued building systems designed to protect rather than exploit. Raina Mercer rebuilt her company into something stronger, more ethical, and more resilient than it had ever been. She became a vocal advocate for corporate accountability and transparency, using her platform to push for reforms that would protect other companies from the predators who'd tried to destroy her. And Maya Cross started third grade healthy, happy, and proud of her father, the man who'd once cleaned floors to keep her alive and now worked in an office building systems designed to keep other people safe. On the 1-year anniversary of the day Evan had stopped Argent, he and Maya stood together in the lobby of Onyx Tower, looking up at the glass walls that stretched toward the sky. Do you like your job, Daddy? Maya asked. Evan thought about the past year, the testimony, the threats that had come and been neutralized, the slow, hard work of rebuilding a reputation and a career from ashes, the late nights and early mornings and constant vigilance required to protect what they'd won. It wasn't easy, but it was good. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. Because you're doing important things. Evan looked down at his daughter, the small, fierce, impossibly brave girl who'd survived more than any child should have to, and smiled. Because I'm doing the right things, he said. Maya took his hand. I'm still proud of you. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. They walked out of Onyx Tower together, into the Seattle afternoon, into a future that was uncertain but theirs, into a life where they didn't have to be invisible to survive. Evan Cross had spent 3 years in exile, cleaning floors and hiding from the world that had destroyed him, but he wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was a father, a fighter, and a man who'd proven that sometimes the people everyone overlooks are the ones who see the truth everyone else misses. And that truth had saved them all.